What's up, everybody? Welcome to the 301 Club.
Welcome.
This is our podcast where we give you the 411 on how to get wealth in your 20s. And specifically today, we're going to make an offer on a house to build your wealth. And when it comes to putting an offer on the house, you can put the offer that is listed for sale, or you can go higher or lower. It's really going to depend on the environment that you're in. For example, if you're in a seller's market where there's a lot less inventory available for purchase, the seller is going to have more of an advantage, especially in the case in our zip code, shout out 20886. We had a huge seller's market when we decided to get this house that we're in right now. So we had to focus on a few clauses that gave us an advantage over the other buyers.
Right, exactly. And I think every house is different. And so like you were saying earlier, it depends on like the house and like what kind of market you're working. It depends on the house, and that'll exactly, what's the word for it? That'll exactly correlate to the market it is, because essentially every house is its own market. So it's important to pick up on the details. Do your research on the particular property so that you understand. Like, let's say the house has been on the market for 60 days. That's a long time, so that means they're not really getting any offers. So that's like kind of like you were saying, a buyer's market. Yep. So that your favor falls into the buyer. So I know people have a misconception, or they might think when they hear market, they think, oh, like a whole area, like the market of the zip code, whatever it is. But realistically, it's the house. So you have to do your research. So like I can pull up Zillow now, and most websites that are related to houses and buying property and whatnot, they'll give you the listing days, or like it'll let you know how long it's been on there for.
Yeah, for example, this house right here, if you want to show through the Zillow,
so
it's public information to know how many days the house is on sale. And here we can see it was on sale for 50 days. So just like John was saying, the buyer has a little bit more leverage in negotiating for this house, because most likely there's going to be less people wanting to buy the house. And that is a tricky situation, because some of this stuff you can't determine. Like John, you talked about the quality of the home, and each home is its own market, because there's different defects on different houses. Right. For example, there could be pests that are visible during your tour. There could be repairs that need to be done, and some things you can see, some things you can't see. Like, for example, the inspection of the foundation of the house, you would need to hire an inspector for that, and that's going to be at about $700 to $1,500 most likely. And so you got to do the trade-offs between how much you're willing to put up to prevent the house from being not what you expect. And so some of these things include the escalation clause, which we'll go over, which we use actually for this house here, because we did have 6 other offers, and this house was on the market for 2 days, and they put a deadline on that on the really offers quick, like 2 days after.
It's like a week from that day.
Yeah, exactly. It was about 4 or 5 days. The house was already offered for, and it was down to negotiation.
Yeah, so I think for people out there, when they have a particular property that they set their sights on, is to pay attention, like you were saying, those small details, and that's going to affect the way you your attack plan. It's going to affect the way you reach out and like how you maneuver with the seller's agent. Technically it would be your agent, and you would tell everything. They would obviously help you too, but to have some sort of idea of how you're going to go about it. Like for this scenario, it was seller's market. Seller had the leverage because they were getting so many offers, and it had only been on the market for 2 days.
Right, and so that required us to actually offer above listing price.
Yeah, so we did an escalation clause, I think. Or at first, that's what we thought, but then our real estate agent was like, just make an offer of this amount, and that should just be like bottom line how much you're offering. So, but escalation clause would have been a good idea, but essentially, since we already had, I think like the money was there, so it was like, why not try to offer a little more? It comes down to
how much capital you're holding, also depending on if you can afford this escalation clause.
That too.
Because before we get into the details of our experience, let's define what that is.
Yeah.
Basically, if there's other offers, and someone offers maybe the same price as you, This escalation clause says that automatically you're going to go match that person on the price, and you can even do it maybe over a penny or $1,000 or your choice.
Yeah, and it's like almost like a bidding thing. It's like
an automatic bidding war.
Yeah, exactly. But then like you don't know the other person's card, so essentially you have to kind of take that risk and be like, okay, well, I know this is the listing price. For example, let's use a random number of like, let's say the listing price is at 300,000, and you know there's other offers, which means there's other offers on the table for the same price. Essentially, so if you have a little extra money, you want to put up a little more, then you would say, okay, so I want to offer a $300,000 offer, but I also want to do an escalation clause of like $5,000 or a $10,000, but with an increment of, I think, because there's like details you can put in there, so it kind of helps you too. So, or the buyer as well, so they can essentially not put up the whole $10,000 or $5,000, whatever it may be. If it's like up to $5,000, but in $1,000 increments.
Yeah, and to the viewers out there, don't get overwhelmed with this process, because this is all going to fall on your realtor, and it comes down to picking and they're really going to your realtor's aligned with your strategy and what your finances are, because you don't need to technically tell your realtor your finances, but kind of you need to give them an idea of how much capital you have, and like if you can afford an escalation clause, or if there's other contingencies that might be beneficial to you. Because for us, the escalation clause wasn't enough, as John mentioned. So on top of that, we had to include a appraisal contingency. So John, you want to go into that?
Yeah, so I think that has to do with the bank, and this happens sometimes where the bank obviously has to protect itself, so it's going to do an appraisal of the house, and they're not going to give a loan out for, let's say, I'll use that number again, $300,000. They're not going to give a $300,000 loan out for property that's been appraised at $250,000. So the bank is going to go out and appraise and value the house themselves. So there's like a whole different thing that's separate from the.
Yeah, just to clarify on that, the bank doesn't actually inspect it, but they hire a third party to do it. But in some states, they are the ones who are only allowed to hire. And the state of Maryland, they have to hire the person. So you can't choose your inspection company unless you want to do a second one. Then you can kind of. You can refute the reappraisal and say, hey, this is not what I think the market is looking like. We're going to do another one, either with the one that with the appraisal company that the bank hired, or you can do your own. But yeah, you can continue with the our experience with the appraisal.
Yeah, clause. So I guess that covers like what exactly an appraisal is like, and it's just pretty much the value of the house that it's currently. Mm-hmm. in a monetary
value. The way that you use this for your negotiation strategies on making an offer is that you can include this appraisal clause, meaning that if, for example, using your example, if the house is listed for $300,000 and you put the offer in, but then it comes back at $290,000, then the bank is only going to give you $290,000.
Exactly. So you have to make up for the.
So you got to use your own capital to cover the rest.
So
and you're signing a contract with the seller, saying that you will do this, and so you're going to have to do that, or you're going to lose your deposits.
Yeah, so that's one thing I guess people should keep in mind, is that might happen, and so they can do, if they have extra capital they're working with, they can do that. So the appraisal comes in at like, it could be even worse than that. Maybe like worst case scenario, the seller listed it at $300,000, but the appraisal came back at $250,000. And so you would have to make that $50,000 gap, because they're not going to loan you more than $250,000. So,
right.
It's important to keep that in mind, and also don't overextend yourself when it comes to that appraisal clause. And I think to go back to what you were saying earlier, I think it is a good idea to keep it open communication with your agent, because they're trying to get the best deal for you. And so I feel like most often than not, they'll work with you, because I'm sure a lot of the information we got was from other realtors, real estate agents. I'm sorry. But yeah, so like that's kind of what the information we came to the table with, and so our real estate agent kind of guided us through, and also mentioned other things, and helped us get the best sort of offer on the table.
Yeah, and this brings us to our next contingency that our realtor suggested to us, which
the HOA,
I think because we had a good
documents.
relationship with him, he was able to help us out with the fact that you can also waive the inspection. And this is another thing. Yeah. When you're in a seller's market, this is going to be the primary contingency that you can add. That's going to be better than the other offers, most likely, because a lot of people, especially families, and if you're in your 20s, you might not have a family yet, or if you're doing this by yourself or with a business partner, it's more so for the ROI, the return on investment. So taking that risk is going to be a kind of a requirement, which is what we did. And we came out on top because our house got appraised for more than we bought it for. And there's nothing wrong with the inspection. In fact, if you do remove the inspection,
if you have a friend, that's what I was going to chime in there. If you have if you like remove the inspection, and so that, that's sellers will like that more, obviously, because they don't have to deal with that. And, maybe they do have a few things that the house needs
because
done.
The contract could fall through, because this way, if the inspection comes back in favor of the buyer, meaning there's a lot of repairs that need to be done, etc.,
it can be leveraged against the seller.
And then you can make the seller pay for that. But if you waive this clause, then you can't do that anymore. And so in turn, the seller is going to like to have the inspection clause waived.
Then I was going to say, just for certain properties, if it looks good, when you do the walkthrough, but there's still something that's like lingering in your mind. If you have a friend that is in that space, because luckily we had a friend that was
our architecture friend.
And also another friend of the real estate agent that Sam came in, and it wasn't an actual inspection. It was more of like a walkthrough. It's
called a walkthrough.
So he just kind of like gave us our opinion. He like walked through, checked everything, and like gave his opinion on what's what, and so there's still ways around, not a way around it, but essentially you can still technically have some sort of like really low level type of like walkthrough, or like informal like sort of like checking everything. So I wouldn't call it an inspection, but it's just kind of like a walkthrough. But that's something that people can do if they have the networking, they meet the right people, and they have a friend that works in that space that's an inspector.
Actually, we got our inspector, our walkthrough inspector, through our realtor. They were actually friends. They grew up together. So keep the circle small is a suggestion for us, especially when you're trying to build your wealth by buying real estate. So continuing with building wealth, you have to know if you're in a buyer's or a seller's market, which we kind of touched on, and we'll give you the experience of our house purchase.
So I think luckily this house was a seller's market, but it was such a great property that we took the risk on it. And
then I'll just go into the changing economics of the time, because about 2 months ago, houses in this area, shout out 20886, it was going about 30 offers on a house at a time, right? And this was probably maybe in January, February, when interest rates were low, demand was high, seller's market. But this house ended up only actually getting 6 other offers that the seller had accepted at the end of the day. So
I think things were moving slower.
Things are starting to slow down. And today, September 2022, it's definitely leveling off to be more leaning towards a buyer's market. But you can't really determine that. So the best way to approach this is to use your contingencies and talk to your realtor about it.
Exactly.
And they're going to give the best advice because they know the area. If you've chosen a realtor who's
a right one, take your time and do your due diligence.
Exactly. And
so I think to go to the next thing, like something that also is like a way to get out of it, essentially. So if things don't go your way, you make an offer, but you overextend yourself. You can technically use an HOA doc. So like depending on what house you get. So HOA, homeowners association. So if your property is part of a homeowners association, you have to pay fees, etc. But really what it comes down to though is they have to provide those documents. And if they don't provide those, if they do provide those documents, and when they do, that can be a reason to pull out of the contract, and you don't lose anything. I don't know.
You don't use your escrow deposit, which you actually have to put about 1% to 2% of your down payment towards your loan. You have to give it as a cashier's check to the seller to show them that you're actually serious. And actually, you don't have to do this, but once again, we use this as leverage in a seller's market, because if someone else
is doing the same thing, they're already probably doing it. So
the condo docs are this is going to be your last resort. But usually, when you get them from the seller, you have about 5 days. I think we had like 5 days to respond on that.
And that can be a way for the person to be like, the buyer to be like, you know what, actually I changed my mind. So
because you can easily say, hey, I don't like how the parking situation is here.
I mean, it's just,
even for us, a mistake we made is that when we
didn't really look into the parking
house, we didn't even look into the parking situation.
My car got towed, which was unfortunate. But just make sure you do due diligence on the documents, and and
it's all going to be explained on there.
Yeah, exactly. And take your time to read it, like really take the time to read it, or like hire, I don't know if you could hire somebody to read it maybe, but because there's a lot, the documents are really long, but I think that's kind of what put us off a little bit, but we kind of figured it wasn't too complicated, because he was like, there's 2 spots available. Okay. But we had no idea we needed
A parking pass.
Parking pass, yeah. Well, it's like a registration thing type thing. It's pretty much a parking pass. Yeah, you just put a sticker on your windshield.
And also the docks will tell you how to get your mail, the pools in the area, the recreation activities, etc.
So sometimes there are benefits to it being part of an HOA.
And these are usually going to be involved in with townhomes and condos. So if you're buying a single family, there's most likely not going to be an HOA, but there still can be.
If it's a townhouse, maybe.
Look out for that.
Yeah. So I would say more often than not, probably townhouse for sure. House, single family, separate, detached house, probably not an HOA.
Yeah, usually not.
But I was gonna say, we keep talking about this buyer and seller market, but I want people to understand that when we say that, we mean the house itself. So each house is different. Sometimes you'll have a few houses in the area that are for sale, and then they're all part of the same market. No, I wouldn't even go as far as to say that, because I think each individual one's different. So depends on what the state of the house.
Yeah, I would say depending on your the neighborhoods in the area, because you can be in a place where there's very segregated areas of homes based on income. For example, I think in Montgomery County, that's pretty prevalent here. Is like
you like walk from one area to another, the property value changes. So
by like 50%. So you can walk to 50% price changes in houses around this area.
It's true, because like across the street, there's like apartments, and those are not townhomes. So so it's true.
Exactly. Like even here we have townhomes with garages next door.
That's even
but
crazier.
Those are going for $100,000 more than we bought this place for. You got to see the pros and cons of each house and development area in general.
I think that's what I was really trying to say, is like each house has its own market. So just keep that in mind when we say buyers versus seller market. It's really just the house itself, and then doing your due diligence on what the house, like the number of days it's been listed for, which is one thing we mentioned. I'm trying to think of other things that we talked about, and then the clauses, of course, that helps with the pre-approval. But essentially, just understanding that you have to, do your research on the particular property. For example, this one, there was no work that needed to be done. So sometimes you get lucky, and on top of that, we got fortunate with the appraisal came in at 10K more than what the price listed was at, and what was paid for.
Exactly. Yeah. So, we got lucky, and I mean, all this information should be talked with your realtor before you finally turn in your offer. Actually, every single point we've made should be decided on before you even offer. However, when you do offer, and if you win, then you're going to get a ratification from the seller. And what this means is that you guys both need to sign it. You guys both need to sign the paper, the contract that says that the seller will sell this house to you under all of these contingencies that we just explained, including getting your loan approved and all of that. So for us, what had happened is that the interest rates were going all over the place. They were going, up to 6%, down to 5.5% every week. So what we had included was in our contract, we were going to have one buyer and two people on the title. And the way that the words were written was that Chase and John are going to be owners. But then in actuality, the seller only wanted the language to say Chase, John, not and, because I think it had something to do with how the buyer or how the bank wanted it to be worded too, because the bank is going to have the most say into your contract up until this point, because the main point is that they can change the interest rate all the way up until your ratification. So we pulled in the contract on Friday, and by Monday the interest rate had gone up by like 0.25% actually, and our lender said no, we can't change anything because your agent didn't give me the contract until Monday. So
so I think those things are important to keep in mind. But essentially, I think regardless, that just might be a speed bump, might be a few days, and then might be.
And your situation may be different. So comment below your experiences or any questions you have about all of these different contingencies, because the way the market's moving this year, you're going to need some of them. So thanks for listening today. See y'all later.
See you guys.